One of my interests in the world is Iraq and the Iraq wars that we've had in the world. We've had 2 Iraq wars. I think because of the situation we had with Saddam Hussein. I think Saddam Hussein was a problem. He was some kind of madman and dictator. I think he didn't have control over his sanity. And he made kind of very unjustified actions, military actions, in invading Kuwait and antagonizing America. I think America is very dominant in the world, and I think Saddam Hussein kind of antagonized America in very significant steps. So I think that's quite important, but I think Saddam Hussein was a problem in Iraq. He was a military dictator, but I don't think he was very strong or very powerful as a military dictator. I think he just had some kind of sanity issue and a vanity issue. So I think that's why there was a problem with Saddam Hussein. There's some kind of an issue there with his vanity. And I think that his kind of aggressive stance in the Middle East created a very hostile and aggressive position in the Middle East, an unstable position. And I think that because of Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Party, we kind of had the first Iraq war. We also had the Iraq-Iran war, which was a 10-year Iraq-Iran war, and I don't think Saddam Hussein was able to conquer Iran with that. He was able to do an even fight with Iran with that 10-year war, and it was a long 10-year war. So I think the best Saddam Hussein could do was just kind of match the capability of Iran. And I think that kind of shows or demonstrates pretty much a slight level, kind of his level of military capability. It's kind of slightly off that level. So I think with that we had kind of like the first Iraq war where he invaded Kuwait, and I think that's unjustified because obviously America has a very strong interest in the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, but also the other Arab states, and it's seriously committed to the Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia and perhaps other Arab states, because these Arab states and Arab countries are important in the world because of the Muslim world, and I think America is kind of very committed to dealing with the Muslim world in the world. So I think that's why it's important. But I think Saddam Hussein displaced that kind of interest with the Muslim world in the world and took his own personal ambition with these interests. So I think that's a consideration. But I think we had the First World War where he kind of conceded American dominance and control over the Middle East, and that was a positive step. But I think that we also had a second Iraq war, and that was with President George W. Bush, who had an issue with terrorism in the world or something. And I think with this he invaded Iraq, and he invaded Afghanistan as well. But in invading Iraq, he kind of destroyed the government, including the Ba'ath Party. He destroyed the government there, and it's been a vacant government since the invasion of Iraq, which has lasted over 20 years. So I think that Iraq has been kind of displaced and vacant as a country in the world. There's been something like 1.5 million deaths in Iraq as well. 1.5 million deaths. That's like a sixth the size of the Holocaust. So I think that there's something like it's a sixth the size of the Holocaust. But I don't think the world looks at those at that very much in Iraq. I don't think the world pays much attention to that fact in Iraq. I mean, 1.5 million lives is quite a lot of lives, and especially when there is very little justification for a long 20-year war in Iraq. So I think that there is an issue there with kind of like a Holocaust situation in Iraq, and I think America is kind of responsible in some ways for that, and there's no end in sight for kind of the power vacuum in Iraq, so it could go on for another 10 years. I don't think America has an interest to pull out of Iraq, primarily because it can't pull out of Iraq because of perhaps issues with Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey and Iraq itself. So I think it's kind of committed to staying in Iraq for perhaps another 10 years, and that is a very expensive presence, a military presence in Iraq, and a big commitment by America in its foreign policies around the world. So I think that is an issue. But I think that with this vacuum in Iraq, we have lost pretty much all of the Middle East, and it's become some kind of a backwater now, without any serious intentions in the world. So that's my view about Iraq. Thank you.